Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Reinhart from Proactive Health and Wellness. We are going to get started here shortly. I am going to wait for a few people to hop on here. Looks like we're starting to get a few people to join us. We're going to take some time today, hopefully answer some questions for some parents. This is going to be something. This is one of the things that I really enjoy doing, educating and teaching. And so, fun morning for me too. So before we kind of dive in a little bit, today when I'm going through the information, I don't know if I'm necessarily going to be able to see the comments section. But if you would do me a favor and either put a comment there, and I will do my best to try to answer them either while we're live here today or take some time after we're done to go back and either send you message people who have questions and or take some time and answer them today, or I'll message you after we're done. So if you have questions while we're going over the information, please, while you're thinking about it, go ahead, type it in the comment section, shoot us a message, let us know. But today's all about kind of today's a culmination of a lot of training that I've been doing. I've personally been a doctor of chiropractic for almost 12 years now. And I really started diving into this information about 2 years ago. I started doing some training with the National Wellness Foundation. And it's kind of springboarded to helping more and more children and just going over some consistencies that we see. Some things that we see and we hear over and over and over again, and hopefully it will make sense. You know, when I've talked to parents about this, or when I've given this talk in the past, oftentimes I hear, "Oh my gosh, that explains my child to a T. That's exactly what happened." And a lot of times there's some aha moments when we're going through the information here. Or the other thing that I hear is, "I wonder if dot dot dot. I wonder if that's what's causing my nephew's issue. I wonder if that's why such and such is having these issues. I wonder why these issues. Or I wonder if that could be why." Who you think of someone, you think of some child, you think of some parent, and you answer the question, "I wonder if that's why." And so, hopefully tonight or this morning, sorry, what we do is we'll hopefully give you guys some answers. So I'm going to bring up my slides here. Awesome. Yeah, it looks like I can see some comments on there too. So I'll do my best to try to, if anybody has any questions, to answer them as we go along. But I want to start out with this quote. They say, "Knowledge is power." And it's true. When we have a knowledge on a subject, that is very powerful. But what's more important is applied knowledge. Applied knowledge is power. So if you're watching today, or if you're watching on a replay and you're watching this, and at the end of the day you end up doing nothing about it, it's kind of a waste of time. What I really want is to take the information you have today and apply it, and that's when we really, really get results. A little bit more about me. So I, first and foremost, am a father. This is my family, my wife Cheryl and my two boys. Hudson is the older son and Owen is the youngest. And, you know, I've always loved working with kids as a chiropractor, but once I had two children of my own, it became a little bit deeper passion of mine. These guys are the reason that I do what I do. And it is personally scary and terrifying to me when we look at a lot of the statistics and a lot of the data. The American Journal, I believe the American New England Journal of Medicine published an article a couple years ago that they are believing that my children's generation might be the first generation of kids in the history of the world who are not expected to outlive their parents. Throughout the history of the world, life expectancy has continued to rise and rise and rise. And we've reached this tipping point where we might start to go backwards. That terrifies me, that drives me, and that's why I'm here, why I'm doing what I'm doing. So when I talk about this being a passion of mine, it's a passion of mine because I'm absolutely a parent first. I know some of the struggles. And now my kids don't have sensory challenges, right? I don't have some of the challenges that some of you parents who are watching do. But I know what it's like to start back to school. We're going through that right now, and it's a transition. It's tough. I've been there when kids aren't sleeping at night. I know that. In my experience, it also helps me, but it drives me to what I do. So these guys are my passion. Like I said, I've been a chiropractor for about 12 years. I've been owner of Proactive Health and Wellness for about 3.5 years now, and I love what I do. I love it, and these, once again, this is why I do what I do. So I want to start out with something called an awareness test. And I'm just going to kind of start this, hit play, and just let you watch this. The goal is, what I want you to do is count how many times the team in the white passes the ball.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So the moral of the story is, it's easy to miss something you're not looking for. And that's kind of the take home here. Did you see the moonwalking bear? The first time I watched it, completely missed it. I wasn't looking for the moonwalking bear, right there, smack dab in the middle of the screen, and completely missed it. And so what's happening with our children, that is, when I talk to parents, every single parent kind of knows this is happening, but don't necessarily put all the pieces. And as a doctor of chiropractic, before I started training with the National Wellness Foundation, I didn't put the pieces together. It was happening right in front of my eyes, and I completely missed it. That's what we're going to go over today. And so, we affectionately, when we talk about this, we call our talk the perfect storm. And what is the perfect storm? And basically, it's stress. And stress now, when we talk about even conception to birth, pregnancy is an extremely, extremely stressful time for mom and baby, even from day one. It's like, okay, how's the baby? How's the heartbeat? Is it too fast? Is it too slow? Is the baby growing? Is it growing fast enough? Is it growing too slow? Okay, do we have all the limbs? Do we need to do a check to look at all their chromosomes? Okay, we're doing good there. Is baby still growing? Is baby growing fast as what they expect? Then we check, okay, how's mom? How's her blood sugars? How's every single thing all the way up? Is baby going to be too big? Do we need to go early? Do we need to induce? Are we getting right past, we're at 40 weeks. We're getting late. Every single part is extremely stressful from the moment of conception. So mom is getting hardwired from stress from day one. Intervention, injury during labor and delivery, this number is on the rise. We're coming back to that one. That one's going to be a big, big one, because intervention during birth, labor, and delivery is, once again, happening all the time now, when it didn't used to. And so we have the stressful pregnancy, we have intervention during labor and delivery, and leads to stress, colicky baby, not sleeping well, not feeling well. When baby's not doing well, the whole family doesn't do well. If baby's not helped, then we stressed, sick, infant, toddler, the ear infections start in, ear infections, antibiotics, more ear infections. We put tubes in their ears. All of a sudden, we're taking all that drainage away from the ears, start going into the lungs, start going in the chest, chronic respiratory, asthma, allergies, and leads to sensory anxiety, focus, stuck child. I talked to someone last night, and I kind of mentioned, this is what we typically see: labor, delivery, stressful, intervention, C-section, colicky baby, not sleeping well, ear infection. Go through the list, and then if we don't get it to number 5, if we were going to put a number 6 on there, we see a lot of headaches, migraines, things like that. But this is the typical story that we hear when we are talking to parents and we see these challenges. And it's stress mode, and that's really what it boils down to. And so what are we looking for is basically stuck on stress. When we look at the nervous system, there's a natural stress response system that is very, very beneficial. But there's also, we look at the other side, there should be a balance, that we have a brake pedal system in our body that helps us, once that stress is gone, helps us to come back down to a normal resting level. And if we're stuck in that stress mode and neurologically not able to put on the brakes, that's when the problems really start to arise. So if we're hardwired neurologically for stress, that's where the problem is. How do we hardwire? How do we unravel it? I took 8 hours of continuing education last Saturday, all talking about how a lot of brains now are hardwired for the stress mode, and the body's natural brake pedal system just isn't doing what it's supposed to do. This is a quote from Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's a PhD, and he says, "The function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other cells." We're going to be talking a lot about the brain today and the nerves that branch off of the brain. And that's really what the major job of your brain is, to find out what it's doing, what your body's doing in its environment. We're going to talk a little bit later about a boy and kind of what happened with him and how he was unable to perceive his environment. And because his brain wasn't getting information to perceive the environment, it was unable to send messages back out to coordinate everything, coordinate all other cells in the body. And so we're talking a lot about perception and coordination, very, very important for all these types of things. So we can take a look a little bit deeper at the nervous system and what the nerve does. We're going to be going, like I said, diving in deep here in a little bit, talking about some of the neurology. But the nervous system controls and coordinates every single function in your body. So this is a handout we give a lot of the people who come to our office. We take a look and see, especially this upper part of the neck, the neurology that feeds back into the brain and supports the brain is really, really important. But we see lungs, we see gut, digestive stuff, all controlled by these nerves that exit your spine. And anywhere there's a disconnect, you lose that natural feedback loop. The brain isn't able to see what's going on with the body. If the brain doesn't know what's going on with the body, it cannot adapt to our environment, and it can't make changes to deal with whatever stress we're putting on it. So it's all about this natural feedback loop communication and maximizing that. So when we talk about subluxation, basically it's a stress mode stuck on. We're constantly in stress mode, stuck on, go, 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 all gas pedal, no brake. How do we tap those brakes? How do we calm everything down and allow our body to get out of that stress mode and get functioning normally and be nice and balanced? And that's what we're going to talk about here. And so we're going to go into a little bit deeper here. Where does it all start? Where does it all begin? What causes it? And what can we do to change that feedback loop? We're going to do a little bit of nerd time here. This is something that I really, really enjoy looking at the science and looking and learning about what's happening with the brain. And this is based on a lot of current research. This is what we see. And we're going to break it down and hopefully get it to a point where it's all this complex neurology can be a little bit easier understood. So the first step that we see, the first thing that happens is something called dyskinesia. And dyskinesia is basically a term that when we break it down and simplify it, it means not working, not functioning, not moving, misalignment, fixated, joint specifically when it comes to the spine, when it comes to what we're looking at. And oftentimes that comes from some type of injury. And let me kind of see if I want to preface the next slide. So the next slide, in the next little video we're going to show, changed my perspective on this. I I used to have this image in my head that a baby that was born from a C-section, well, a C-section was brutal for mom, obviously. It's a surgery where they basically cut her open and lay her guts out on the table, right? And that's kind of maybe sounds a little vulgar, but that's kind of the truth behind it. Well, it was brutal for mom. I had this image in my head that it was actually easier for the baby. And then I saw this video. And it completely changed my understanding of what is happening with our kids. And so the next video we're going to show, we're actually going to show a C-section from a baby's perspective. So if you do get queasy stomach, if you do feel unsettled, this is something you might want to look away for just a minute. We're going to come back here. I'll go past it in a minute. But if you can, watch this because this will make sense with what we're going to be talking about after this.
Irritated.
Come on, buddy.
Here's a girl. Here's a girl. Make cute for the camera.
You see him torquing and pulling on the baby's head like that. That still, to some degree, makes me sick to my stomach every time that I watch it. At no other point in a child's life is that an acceptable way to hold a child. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that a normal C-section can put up to 60 pounds of stress on a child's neck. Remember where those doctors' fingers are. Look at that. We're going to come back to that. If someone tried to grab one of my kids and hold them like that today, you can bet that I'm coming out swinging. If someone does that to my child, to any child, you would be you'd be upset to your stomach and you'd be angry. But this is what a normal C-section birth looks like. And when we talk about these sensory kids, these anxiety kids, these focus kids, ADD, ADHD, 80% of the kids that I talk to, if not more, have this in their history. And when we talk about all these issues with kids, when I was in school, we didn't have a lot of these issues, right? We didn't have a lot of these kids with who had learning disabilities, who had focus issues, who had a lot of anxiety. And while it is, like I said, it's not 100% of the kids that we see, it's a very, very high percentage. And when we look at what is happening with the C-section rates, how often this is happening in the United States. I was born in 1981. So about the time that I was born, about 17% of the births were C-section. The World Health Organization says that an acceptable rate for a C-section is right around 10 to 15%. C-sections, when used appropriately, are life-saving procedures. There's the mom that I talked to just the other day. Like if she would have not had a C-section, then it would have been, it might not have been her and her son might not have made it, and might not have lived. And it was absolutely necessary to save her son's life. But when I hear stories like, my doctor told me that I was a redhead and I had a bleeding risk, and so I need to have a C-section because I can't have a normal pregnancy and a normal labor and delivery. When I start to hear stories like, well, my doctor wants to induce me on Thursday night so I can have my baby on Friday so the doctor can go on vacation, we need to start looking at labor and delivery different because the number of C-sections are going up and going up pretty dramatically. We look back in 1981, 17%, and as we get closer to 2000, that number has been steadily climbing to 23, 24%. The information we have on here is about from 2012 is 33%. The newest data that I've seen from 2015, 2016 is we're like 33, 34% still. But 1 in every 3 births are what you just saw. And that puts a ton of stress on a child's upper part of the neck. That's where we get the dyskinesia. That's where things get stuck. We have this injury that happens before the child ever takes its first breath, and it's never assessed, never looked at. We look at eyes, ears, nose, throat, heart rate, everything else, but nobody assesses if they've had especially if they had a birth like that, how is a child's neck and how is it functioning? Number one thing that I see. And when even necessarily when we look at like a normal birth, right? This is a study that was done by not a chiropractor, it was done by a DO, that they looked at what's called somatic dysfunction in healthy newborns. They looked at healthy kids and whether the birth was normal, right? Whether it was normal, quote unquote, vaginal delivery or whatever. But 99 out of 100 children had this pattern of subluxation dysfunction after birth. So even a normal birth can have this, but I will say, like I said, that way of being born is significantly more traumatic for children than a normal vaginal delivery. And here's some more references, some more information, some more studies about linking C-section birth and some other negative health outcomes with children. It's starting to gain some traction. So if anybody wants that, please message us and we can send you some more research on that. So what happens? We have this injury at birth. The joints, especially the joints in the upper part of the neck, get stuck, get fixated. We have dyskinesia, which leads to disafferentation. Oftentimes what we see when we see kids with sensory issues, we see kids with anxiety issues or focus issues, we see it as an output type of an issue. We see it from the inside out, right? But really, it's more of an input issue, abnormal input. And we're going to talk about something called nociception. Nociception is basically noise, noisy brain. We hear busy brain, noisy brain. Kids can't focus. Nociception is noise. So that's the neurologic definition for noisy brain. So I'm going to show another video about sensory processing disorder. And this does a very good job of describing what sensory processing order is. And then we're going to come back to that noisy brain nociception. So stay tuned for that. We're going to watch this video here real quick.
Some kids are really bouncy and can't sit still. Some kids aren't very coordinated. Some see food as a pile of toxic goo that hurts their mouth, jangles their taste buds. School might be a mysterious place, but things don't make much sense. If this sounds like you may have sensory processing disorder, and we're going to explain it here. Your body has 7 senses. Vision in your eyes, hearing in your ears, touch in your skin, taste in your mouth, and smell in your nose. And you have 2 movement senses, your muscles and your sense of balance. In sensory processing disorder, these senses don't communicate right with your brain. Think of the nerves connecting your brain and senses as a set of roads. Those roads should be smooth superhighways so that the senses and brain can communicate fast. If you have sensory processing disorder, then some of your roads are bumpy and rough. You can also think of the senses as having a broken volume control. If the volume is too high, you will use your senses too strongly. If the volume is too low, you won't feel sensation at all. In fact, you'll want more. Some kids overcome these problems as they grow older. Others need help. Help is usually occupational therapy, and it's fun. Occupational therapy helps build up the connections between your senses and your brain. The more you do, the stronger and smoother they get, kind of like paving those roads. After a while, you'll learn to slow down and sit still. To pay attention. To eat. To be comfortable and happy doing movement. It takes time. There's homework, too. the more you work at it, the better it gets.
So that's a great video about sensory processing disorder. I think it describes it really well. Let me go forward here. And so it's all about brain getting information, right? When your brain gets information, it's very calming. So movement, every single joint in our body has little tiny nerve receptors, and they're called proprioceptors. And the job of these little tiny nerve receptors is when we move, when we're up and moving around, the nerve receptors fire and sends information back to our brain. When the brain gets the information, it's very calming. Your job of the nervous system and your brain is to control and perceive and coordinate, our environment. So when we're moving, it's getting information, it can perceive, it can coordinate based on that information, everything else in the body. Proprioception only happens with movement. So we're going to go back a couple steps, right? Fixation, birth injury, stuck, not moving, no motion information back to the brain. When you don't have motion, when you don't have movement, you get nociception. Nociception is noise. It's pain is what sometimes it's referred to, but it's really noise to the brain. So you have these noisy brains because it's getting this information that it does not want, and it's looking for information that it needs. It puts your brain in this panic mode and speeds it up. Why does occupational therapy work so well for kids? When they're moving around, they're bouncing on balls, when they're up moving around, they get that proprioceptive input, they get that movement input to the brain, and it calms the brain down. We see sensory kids who love going to the beach. When they're in the sand, all that tactile information is calming to them. When they're in the water, when they're swimming, it's calming to them because the brain is getting that information that it is looking for. Now, once again, we talk about proprioception. We talk about movement and nerve receptors movement. 60% of the proprioception that your brain needs comes from the spine. A third of that just comes from the upper part of the neck. That same area right there. So when we talk about information getting back to the brain, the video said occupational therapy is like paving the roads. Absolutely. Occupational therapy is awesome. What we do is we take out the roadblocks. We try to remove those. If you're anywhere near our office, you'll know all about construction and roadblocks and detours, right? We're trying to remove those and improve that information that's going back into the brain. So subluxation, some dysfunction in the spine, is really a sensory processing problem, right? If your brain is not getting sensory to process, not perceiving the environment because it's not getting information, then you can have an output issue not because there really is an output issue, it's because your brain's not getting any information, or at least not the information that it needs to process its environment correctly. Fixation, loss of that information to the brain, puts your brain in panic mode. You get noisy, loud brains. So, you have fixation, things get stuck, your brain doesn't get information. When your brain doesn't get information, it puts it into this panic mode, and then it puts you in a state of what's called dysautonomia, which is basically dysfunction within the autonomic nervous system. We're going to talk about that. But back to Bruce Lipton, the PhD, he also said that you cannot be in growth and protection mode at the same time. You can only be in one. So what does that mean? When we look at your nervous system, specifically what's called your autonomic nervous system, organs, glands, tissues, things like that, it's broken down into two branches. The sympathetic nervous system is like your body's stress defense mechanism. When your body's under stress, it kicks in, and it's designed to help your body adapt to any stress that you encounter. So I always talk, the example that I give is, let's imagine caveman. Saber-toothed tiger sees caveman, starts chasing caveman. these nerves, these stress nerves, these sympathetic nerves kick in, and all their energy is put in getting away from that stress, running away. Go, 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 go. If you're a parent who has a kid who's stuck on stress mode, that sounds familiar, right? While caveman is running away from saber-toothed tiger, is caveman worried about digesting the hamburger he had for lunch? No. Is he worried about fighting off the flu bug? No. Is he worried about taking a nap? No. Is he worried about growth and development? No. All his energy is running away. Get away from that stress. When caveman runs away from the stress, ideally those brake pedal nerves should kick in. And when we look at the brake pedal nerves, like we talked about, the parasympathetic nervous system, your body's natural brake pedal, is in control of rest, relaxation, growth, development, immune system function, and digestive function. So when we look at these sensory kids, they generally have some kind of immune system dysfunction. They always seem sick, getting chronic ear infections over and over and over again. They generally don't sleep very well. Mom and dad say, oh my gosh, they sleep a couple hours at a time and that's it, especially like little tiny babies. They're not sleeping, they're not resting. They have underlying gut digestive issues, right? May be sensitive to certain types of foods, but there's usually some kind of underlying digestive problems because that's all on the brake pedal part of our nervous system. So we want this balance between the gas and the brake. We want the sympathetic nervous system, the stress, the gas pedal is there for a reason. We need it there to adapt to stresses in our environment. But what is key is, does that brake pedal kick in when the stress is gone? Or are we stuck on stress mode all the time and all gas, no brake? When we look at these brake pedal nerves, we look at this nerve, the main brake pedal nerve in your body is called your vagus nerve. Where does the vagus nerve exit your spine? Right there in those fingers. So oftentimes we have this trauma and it irritates and it causes imbalance within that part of our nervous system, and these kids are all gas, no brake from day one. Once again, the vagus nerve there's more and more research that's coming out and showing how important the vagus nerve is. That I just was talking the other day with someone, yesterday with someone, about how there's research now that they're looking at adults, right? But they did a study where they said vagal stimulation can actually decrease inflammation within the gut. The vagus nerve we're finding more and more and more about this brain body, brain gut, brain immune system, this connection, and all lies within the vagus nerve. It's very, very important. And if this nerve isn't doing its job, your body has a very, very difficult time slowing down and growth and growing, developing immune system function and digestive functions. So we want balance between the two. That's key. And that's what dysautonomia is. It's an imbalance between sympathetic and parasympathetic, imbalance between gas pedal, brake pedal, all gas, no brake. And so we have that imbalance. You're stuck in that stress mode. So dysautonomia, uncorrected, leads to dysponesis, abnormal energy output. This can be changed, but this is what happens when you're stuck in stress mode. All gas, no brake. Once again, looks like an output type of an issue because they're go, 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 go all the time. Can't sit down, can't focus, but it's oftentimes due to an imbalance within that part of your nervous system. This was a kind of a cool study. It says sensory processing disorder and parasympathetic like vagus system. They were finding that the parasympathetic nervous system, that brake pedal system, wasn't working well with children with sensory processing issues. So it's gas pedal stuck on. And the research is confirming what I'm saying, that there's just an imbalance within that sympathetic parasympathetic nervous system, leads to abnormal energy output types of things. So ultimately, the fifth D that we have is disconnected. They're not able to process. They just don't seem to understand. They're not getting the information to process, and they seem disconnected. Not because they're really disconnected, it's just their brain doesn't have the information to process to get it to where it needs to be. So what do we do? What do we do with these kids? I would say, I get it, Dr. Reinhart. You know what? That you're describing my kid to a T. I get it. That makes sense. But what can I do for my child? And I rely on technology to determine if I can help someone or not. And we really spent a lot of time and money investing in technology to help us assess everybody, but kids especially, to see if there's something that we can help with, and if so, we use it for re-exams as well to make sure that children or adults even too are responding as we expect them to. But we want to make sure that there's something going on, and we use this technology, thermography, to help us do that. So this is a 3-year-old with sensory anxiety issues, and this helps us look at the nervous system. We look at see if there is stress. When we look at this scan, after we run the scan, we want to see areas where there's white. White means little to no stress on the nervous system. The green is like a mild stress on the nervous system. Blue, if there were blue on here, blue would be a moderate stress on the nervous system, and red is severe. And black is worse than severe, and we're going to show you one that was like that. But this one is a lot of times what we see, sensory anxiety issues. We look at where the stress was, upper part of the neck. Once again, go back to where the doctor was pulling the child out of the C-section, right? A lot of times the stress shows up right here where we see the nerves exit your spine. Now, I would say that this, depending on how soon I can scan a child after they've had the injury, whether it's C-section or whether it's what have you, will depend on what this looks like. I was talking to another chiropractor who I talk with a group of chiropractors at least every other week, and we're just kind of talking about, and everybody has the same story we're telling you, but we're talking about these scans. And I had someone explain it to me this way, and it made perfect sense. If they've had this problem for a while, so let's say I had a 20-year-old, I had a 40-year-old who's come in, and we kind of trace it all the way back to traumatic birth. But let's say we had a 20-year-old who's had a problem there for 20 years. We did a scan and it looks completely, quote unquote, normal. Everything looks white. And in that case, the body's been stuck for so long, this stress response system has weakened and really worn out. So the example that someone said is like, well, I explain it this way. Is let's say that you have a fire alarm in your house, right? And you have a smoke alarm in your house, and there's a fire in your house, and the smoke alarm starts going off, starts beeping, 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 but nobody puts out the fire. Eventually, the battery's going to run out. So even though the fire's there, we don't necessarily hear the beeping. And if you had the fire, if you had the problem for that long, that's what's happening if we do a scan with someone who's older and we don't necessarily see this. If we do a scan with someone who doesn't have any of those things and it's like that, then it's probably actually worse than if we saw a bunch. But this is what we use. We use this to analyze to see if it's something we can help with. In the case of someone who's older who has something like this and we do a scan, we don't see any stress, the first thing we want to do is we want to actually get the scans to start lighting up like a Christmas tree. But this is what we use to analyze these kids to see, is there stress, and where is the stress, and where is the dysfunction. So here's Rocky. Rocky's a cool little guy who, when he first came in, was having some sensory processing type of, wasn't really diagnosed with sensory processing disorder, but I remember his mom saying, he just doesn't respond always appropriately to certain things. Like, for example, Rocky was climbing a tree, right? Fell out of the tree and got a cut all the way down his arm. His arm was covered in blood. What is a normal response for something like that for a child? Come in screaming, crying, oh my gosh, mom, I'm dying, right? Type of a thing. Rocky was like, I think something's wrong. And just cool, calm, collected, just almost like nothing had happened, right? And Rocky was a hockey player, good hockey player, but there was some coordination type of things going on. He had to work really, really hard to be able to do the same types of drills and practice that some of the other kids were doing. So we did a scan with Rocky and found some stress and did some things to work with him to start re-engaging these nerves. First thing Mom noticed is that Rocky started doing drills in hockey practice easier than he's ever done before. Once again, when we get joints moving, get them functioning, get some information back into the brain, it gives your brain information to actually process and coordinate. And so because he was getting the information to process, he was able to start coordinating more easily, and things that had been a challenge for him initially had become easier. Rocky had also used to lead the league in ejections from the hockey league, but now he was, fighting is okay in hockey, but the difference was Rocky knew when to quit. And his mom said that was the biggest thing she was impressed with, that he got into a fight, and instead of getting to the point where the referees are kicking him out of the game or giving a 5-minute major penalty, once the whistle blew, he stopped and he was done. And so he was able to process information to see what was appropriate and what was not. And so one of the things that we do is we can actually do the scan on infants as well. And the best time to get to a child is before they ever have any symptoms, before they go down this road. So this is Noah. And Noah was a C-section baby. And having some trouble sleeping, but other than that, fairly normal baby. He really didn't have a ton of symptoms. So even though he didn't have any symptoms, we did a scan for him. And this is what we found. So we said red is severe, black is worse. That once again, at the very top of his neck is typically where we see the stress after birth. And if we can get to it and correct it, the sooner we can get it and correct it, the faster it is. So if I'm correcting something like this and we're working with a child like this who is about 3 weeks old versus when we started seeing Noah, generally it's a quicker turnaround to get this under control. If we have something that's been stewing and sitting there and festering for 3, 5, 7, 10, 20, 40 years, it's going to take longer to rewire and re-educate the brain to get out of the stress mode than it is for someone who has early. So we talked to Mom about this, and Mom already knew this story before she went into labor. And once again, I'm not anti-C-section because there's absolutely a time and a place. And without going into a lot of details, Noah's C-section was absolutely necessary. He needed it. Doesn't change the fact that it still put a lot of stress on his neck. And because we were able to get to it, Noah's going to have a better start than he may have otherwise. So what are the four most common effects of re-engaging this balance and re-engaging and relieving stress and feeding information back into the brain? The first one that we see, the most common by far, and usually one of the quickest responses that we see is calm sleep. So, oh my gosh, he slept all night last night. My daughter actually took a nap today. That's completely unlike him or her. As soon as we start engaging those nerves, it immediately can calm down the brain. Now, if they are hardwired for stress, sometimes it takes longer for that to become re-hardwired to be hardwired for calm. That can be a thing. But the first thing that we generally see is calm, and then control over environment. Once our brain starts getting information that it can perceive and process, then it allows our body to control other things. So when your kids seem like they're crazy out of control, that's one of the most things that we see initially. And then once our body is perceiving their environment and controlling everything, it allows the ability to connect with the environment around. We see a lot of disconnected kids. But when we start making that eye contact, there's just a different level of understanding that the kids are on board, when the brain is working well, because when the brain gets information that it needs, there's a different level of connection. And finally, the last one is coordination. Like I said, when our body gets that information that it can process, it allows our body to coordinate everything. It allows things that they used to seem clumsy, now they start to seem like they are able to adapt to everything and play things and do sports and do things that they weren't able to do. Those are by far the most common effects that we see, especially early on. And so, what are the next steps? If you're a parent, or like I said, someone who you immediately think of someone when you're watching this. The first thing we want to do is ask questions. If this is causing a question that you have, you're leading to more questions, please, like I said, leave a comment here, reach out to us, send us a message on Facebook, send us a message on this post, or call us, set up a time to sit down and chat. Asking questions is the first step. If you're having questions about this and this is making sense, but it leads to more questions, please ask. Next action step that we want you to take is reduce stress. We call it the 3 T's: thoughts, traumas, toxins. Basically, emotional stress, physical stress, or chemical stress. If we're having some kind of stress, the more we can reduce stress in our environment, the less likely it's going to kick in that fight or flight, that stress mode from the nervous system. The more we can reduce that stress, allows us not to be as stuck in that sympathetic gas pedal mode. And the third thing is, get your child scanned. This is what I rely on to see is there a problem we can help with. And I haven't found a better technology that helps us see real time how the nerves that you can't feel, this is part of your nervous system that you can't feel, how they're working in a safe, quick manner to really give us a gauge on how these nerves, how the balance they are, and what's going on with your child. So let me all right. So that's sorry. Okay. So that's basically the perfect storm. Like I said, a lot of times when I talk to parents about this, when I talk to live or I talk to them in an online workshop, oftentimes I hear, "Oh my gosh, that's my child," and it ultimately leads to the question: is that why? Is that why my child is always anxious and we can't leave the house? Is that why my child can never sit still? And was that why she's having trouble focusing in school? Is that why my child's not sleeping at night? I wonder if that's why my child always gets sick and has ear infections over and over and over again. If that is you as a parent and you're asking, is that why? Like I said, the next step is to really find out. Take the opportunity to see if this is why. See if this is the reason why. We have blocked time in our schedule over the next few weeks to schedule some extra time to do exams and do scans on these kids to see if that's why. The scan is, like I said, the best technology, the best way that I've found to see if that's what's happening. If you would like to take that opportunity and see, let us know. If you email us at info@proactiveohio.com, or please feel free to message us directly on Facebook. We have a special offer that we're going to be doing scans at a discounted rate and exams at a discounted rate over the next few weeks to see if that's something that we can help your child with or not. Like I said, if that's something you're interested in, please reach out to us. Let's have a conversation. Let's see if there's something we can help your child with. Thank you again for your time. Please, once again, if you're thinking about another parent, you're thinking about another child, share this with that parent, share this with that family. And maybe it's not necessarily something that I'm in Columbus, Ohio. Maybe you're on the other side of the country. The great thing about the National Wellness Foundation I'm a part of is we are a group of doctors who are all witnessing the same thing, all have the same training, and all can do what we can to help these children. So even if you're not seeing me, we have a directory of wellness doctors all over the country and even in other countries who know the same information, have the same technology, and can help these kids too. So we'd be more than happy to even help you find someone if you're not close. But thank you again for your time. Like I said, if you have any questions, any concerns, please reach out, and we will talk to everyone soon. Have a great day.